4, recording in progress. That's so they can prove what I said next, put me in cuffs later. No, the reason I say that is because the first thing I have to say is disclaimer. Especially today, we'll be talking a little bit about investing, and I am a registered investment advisor, but nothing I say here today is actual investment advice. If you do need investment advice, you can always obviously consult your financial advisor or give us a call. It's up to you. Okay, we talked in review. There's plenty of, we've heard this many times. There's many, many, many verses in the Bible about prayer and about faith, but over 2,350 verses on money. And I don't know who made that statistic, but there might be more, because every time I go into this lesson, I keep finding more and more. And I start to see things that I think relate to something else. And I start looking deeper and like, hey, this is about money too. So anyways, the principles that we covered very early on, and it's very, very important, is that, the tithe is a test of our heart, the Lord. First fruits, we covered in week 1 and covered it again in 2 and 3. Whose money is it? It's God's, all of it, right? Not just part of it, all of it. We talked about tithing and the blessing that provides. But what does the Bible say about investing? That's what we're going to be at today. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about saving, right? We talked about how important that is to get 3 months worth of savings to make sure that if anything comes up, at least you have some monies to go ahead and take care of that. That's like step 1, baby step 1, to make sure you have enough for any kind of emergency or something that happens. You don't have to, be scared or worried about it. But there is a difference between investing and saving, and those differences are this. For savings, and I get this all the time. I get this call. I'm going to tell you, I get this call at least once a month from somebody saying, Jose, I have, this money that I want to set aside. I'm going to need it in 3 months to buy XYZ, but I want you to invest it. I'm like, when do you need it? Well, I need it in 3 months. Well, guess what? No, that's not investments. That's not investment money. If you need it that quickly, there's no investment out there that's going to be surely give you XYZ investment returns. And usually they want normal investment returns, right, from the market. If the market's returning 10, they want a 10. If the market's doing 5, they want 5. But they don't want the 0.5 that it is in savings right now. So low risk for savings. Whatever you have put aside for those 3 months, don't worry about if it's getting any major interest or not. That's not the purpose of that money. That purpose of the money is for it to be liquid, right? To be there for you when you need it. So you should be in cash, money market, which does pay a little more interest than regular cash, or a CD. The problem with money market, usually you have to have a $10,000 minimum just to get some kind of interest. So it's very important that you do. And then the other thing is that it be FDIC insured. That's usually, your local bank will be FDIC insured, for example. So savings should always be liquid. Don't invest it in something that you can't get to. I've seen that before. Annuities is a perfect example. A lot of people say, well, I put it in an annuity because they guarantee me a 5% return. Well, can you get it? No, I have to wait 10 years. Well, then that shouldn't be savings, right? Investing, on the other hand, always has risk. There's all kinds of risks that investing has, but investment always have risk. And the big thing about investment is you should know why you're investing, how much risk you're taking to invest it, and then also what's the purpose of the investment. What's your goal? What's your gain? I see a lot of that also with people coming to me and say they want to invest for 2 years exactly, and then they're going to need XYZ money at that point, and then they're going to cash it all out. Well, that's not really an investment either, because if I do invest it for those 2 years and we happen to have 2 bad years, and they need this much money for that time frame, then it's probably not a good idea to invest in that point. I say 3 to 5 years minimum, so you can get at least some kind of a cycle in there. But that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the parable of talents. You've heard me mention it a little bit before, but tonight we're going to read the whole thing and kind of go into it a little deeper. So we'll start with Matthew 25, 14 through 30. I'm reading the King James Version, so there's a lot of these and thous, of course, and a little harder. So 14 through 30. And I want you to listen to this first few words of this verse. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. He left. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them another 5 talents. And likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained another 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received the 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, and saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained besides them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Notice he said, good and faithful servant, right? We've talked about being faithful with our assets, our money. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, well done, good and faithful servant, and thou hast been faithful over a few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I know thee, thou art as a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, that is thine. In other words, here's your talent back. Where did I drop off? Thine now. 26. His Lord answered and said unto him, thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knowest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming you should have received mine own with usury. I don't know, never heard that word before. Interest, okay, yeah. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. Notice he took it away from the guy that had 1 and gave it to the guy who had even more, right? For unto every one that has shall be given, and he that shall have abundance, but from him that has not shall be taken away even that which he has. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, there's a lot. It's a long parable, right? But what do we get out of this? You know, one of the things that I hear so much is that, what was the one thing that the one gentleman with one parable, what was his driving force? Fear. That's right, fear. And I want you to understand there's 2 emotions when it comes to money and investing that are prevalent in all of us. And that is greed and fear. And they're both bad. Absolutely. They both are when it comes to investing. The other thing that I want you to get from this is our first point here. God expects us to try and increase what he has been entrusted. If you notice, the first line was for the kingdom of heaven, right? He's saying right from the get-go, look, this is what it's for. I've entrusted with you this much money. You need to try to make it work harder, right? That's really what it comes down to. You can't just dig a hole and put it in there and that's it. And I've had clients come to me and say, I need to take all my money out because I'm going to go put it in gold. I'm scared, right? And I say the same thing. What are you scared of? Well, I think the world's going to come to an end. Really? That's what they said at 1800. They said that in 1900 too. I think the Bible is very clear. It says nobody's going to know, right? So I don't worry about that part. But the other thing it does is why did they do that? Because they're scared, right? Fear. And the number one thing that we found from this one is that fear takes you in a direction that the Lord doesn't want you to go. He's saying, look, trust me. I gave you this, invest it, let it grow. I'll be back for more. The harvest is great, right? He says that. But here's the thing is, why does he want you to get more? The kingdom, that's right. So that we can save more lives, right? It's really what it comes down to. And it's really not difficult to understand, right? The more the church has, the more we can do, the more we can reach out, the more we can, get people coming in. I mean, the more you have yourself, the more you can help the guy on the street or, your neighbor, right? There's always somebody that needs help. There's always somebody that needs to hear the gospel, right? I was talking to a pastor this morning, and he mentioned that at one time they were really broke, and he went to preach somewhere, and his only job was to bring $20 so they could eat, so the family could eat. And what did he do? He forgot the money. Yes, yeah. Sounds like something I would do. Tracy would verify that. But what happened was they gave a loving gift at the church that he preached at. That's very standard, but usually they pay in a check, right? They give him a check and then he goes home. So he knew that he's probably gonna have to drive 2 hours home without eating. But God is faithful. What happened? Somebody came up and gave him $20 cash, not knowing that was perfectly enough money for them to eat that night, which is what happened. And the one question I asked as soon as the service was done today, I went straight to the pastor. I said, "Let me guess, you were tithing, weren't you?" And he says, "Yes, absolutely." In other words, the Lord blessed because he was doing the right thing with his monies, right? But one thing about when we do start to invest the Lord's money, it's very important that you understand the difference between investing and gambling, right? Well, I'll give the Lord $1 gazillion if I win the lottery, right? You ever heard that? I've heard it. People say, well, I play the lottery because if I win a lot of money, I'm going to give it to the church. What's wrong with the money you got now? Oh, well, that's, I don't have enough, right? So gambling, when it comes to gambling, there's always a loser. Always, whether it be the house, the people you're betting with, or you. Usually it's you, right? So that's a very different than investing. Investing, you're buying something that will grow in value or that's worth XYZ. That value might fluctuate, right? But you're investing in something that you assume, if you did the research, that's a good investment, they'll go up. When it comes to stocks, for example, if a company is making money because their product is selling well, and you're an investor in that company, guess what that happens to your investment? It goes up, right? If that company starts to sell something terrible, like Peloton bikes, sorry, then the stock goes straight down, right? Down 80% or something like that. So big difference between putting your money to work in a gambling situation as opposed to putting your money to work in an investment situation. And that's really imperative that you understand that. For example, I have people that come to me and say, well, Jose, what about this XYZ investment that my buddy did and he's up 400% in 2 weeks? Well, what is it? Well, I don't know, but it's up. Well, I would venture to say that's probably gambling, right? I mean, to some extent, because if you don't even know what it is, why would you put your money in it? But we see it all the time. So invest your money. God expects us to. I think that parable says it very well. And there's actually another one, another parable that's very like it. And that is in Luke 19. And it's in verses 15 through 27. I will read those quickly. It's pretty much the same thing, but what I wanted to read this one also is because this is one of many that I found in there. But you can see how important there's a lot of verses dedicated to this subject and this particular way of how we're supposed to think of the Lord's money. And it came to pass that when he was returned and received the kingdom, right? Then he commanded these servants to be called unto him to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Trading? Sound familiar? Investing, right? Then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. And he said unto him, well, thou good servant. Does that sound familiar? Because thou hast been faithful in a very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise to him, be that also over 5 cities. And another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I kept laid up in the napkin. So that he didn't bury in the earth, he just put it in a napkin. For I feared thee, because thou art an austere man. Thou takest up, and thou layest not down, and reapest thou didst not sow. And he said unto him, out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow. Wherefore then gavest not thou my money into the bank, that at my coming I might have acquired mine own with usury, which we know is interest now, right? Thank you, by the way, on that. And he said unto them that stood by, take from him the pound, and give it to that who has 10 pounds. And they said unto him, Lord, he already has 10 pounds. For I say unto you, that unto everyone which has shall be given, for him that hath not, even that he has shall be taken away from him. But those mine enemies which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. So on the first one, we heard gnashing of the teeth. And this one, he said, slay them, right? Now, these are parables, so I think it's quite important that we understand there's an investment, trading, right? He talks about that. Again, it starts with the kingdom, right? And the reward is for those who are faithful and actually do it. If you hide and say, I'm scared and I don't want to do anything because I know, this is a danger, this is a risky situation, guess what? He's saying, no, that's not what I want. I want to give you more, right? If you do it well. So how do we do it? Well, number one, we know it's not gambling. We don't buy lottery tickets, right? No matter how much the lottery is up to. By the way, I'm pretty proud to say I have no idea what it's up to. And so rule number one, don't gamble. Rule number two, understand there is risk in everything that we do when it comes to investing. If you ever hear the word, well, this investment is guaranteed. You ever heard that before? Yep. We hear it in our industry all the time. Well, I'll give you an example. So annuities can be guaranteed, insurance products can be guaranteed because the insurance say, look, no matter what, we're going to pay you, right? And everybody says, well, see, it's guaranteed, so there's no risk. Except for in 2008, 2009, when we had the big financial fiasco, what was the number one financial institution that went broke? Does anybody know? AIG, the largest insurance company in America, went broke. Now the government bailed them out, started printing money, right? But how good is that guarantee when that was going to be gone, right? So anyways, if you hear the word guarantee, CDs, cash in the bank, okay. Investments, guarantee, run the other way. Because there's a couple things with a guarantee. A guarantee means it's costing you something that you might or might not be aware of, right? So stay away from that. Here's how you do it. You diversify. So in Ecclesiastics, and this is way back when, right? Ecclesiastic is right here. 11:2 says, give a portion to 7 and also to 8. That means diversification. For thou knowest that not what evil shall be upon the earth. In other words, he's saying, hey, don't just keep it in one spot, spread it out, right? Diversification. I was a little amazed that there's diversification in the Bible. So, but it's there, right? Now, obviously, in a different context, but in other words, you say, look, you got to spread that risk, right? Spread the risk. Very important. Let's see here. Go ahead, Gary.
When I came to Texas,
Mm-hmm.
we had the banks being collapsed and merged. One of the things that I did was make sure I had my savings in 2 different institutions just because of that.
Yep.
Because although they were FDIC insured, it could be months before you could get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of dividing,
Yeah.
I think, the fact that it's in scripture says we could do that in everything.
That's right. And Gary was talking about how when he first got to Texas, there were some problems with the banks, so he put his money in 2 different banks to divide it out to diversify it, right? I will tell you that during the crash of 08-09, there was several people who had over the limit, which at the time was 100,000. So anything above 100,000 wasn't protected. So they had it all, let's say they have their money in one bank and they had over 100,000. Anything above and beyond was not insured. Yeah, now it's 250. It's gone up because of that situation. It went up. So there's a little bit more protection. But yeah, if generally speaking, if you have over that amount in a bank, first of all, if you've been listening to me, you shouldn't, right? Because that's way more than 3 months. That's way more than 3 months worth of emergency funds, right? I'm just saying I'm just saying that unless you're like gonna buy, something really super expensive and you need the money right away. But really, that's a lot of money. Although everybody's different, right? I have a lot of clients that stick to the 3 months emergency funds. Others have a little bit bigger cushion. I once had, and I know this is a big number, but I had a client who 300,000 in his cash account was minimum. He just freaked out if it went below that. I don't know why, he just did. That was a number in his head, and that was personal to him. So diversify, diversify, diversify. We'll go into a little bit more about diversification in just a second. Second thing is seek good counsel, right? And that is in Proverbs 19:20. And it says this: hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end. I chose that one just because when I was going through it, that's what I found, and that's talking about the Lord being the counsel. But there's several proverbs if you go through there where it says, seek good counsel. And what does that mean, good counsel, right? Well, it's something in the faith of the Lord, right? I know that in the past I've had to deal with a situation in my own family where my kids were like, well, so and so said, right? But is that seeking good counsel just because that person said? And all your friends said that? Yeah. But where do they stand in their faith? Right? We all do it, right? We'll go and get counsel, and you have to pay attention to the fact, is that person coming from the point of view of the Lord in the Bible? Or is he coming from a worldly point of view, right? So when I say seek good counsel, I mean that. And it also talks about, seek good counsel and somebody who's experienced in what you're trying to do. So you don't have to come to me, but if you have, questions about finances and retirement and IRAs and all this stuff, there's plenty of good advisors out there that you can, seek good counsel. There's a statistic that just came out not that long ago that those people that do use advisors over time make a 3% difference in gain compared to somebody who does it on their own. So there is some value there. Thank goodness, because that's what I do. The one thing about diversification too is that you have to understand that diversifying reduces your risk, right? Because you don't put all your eggs in one basket. We all know that saying. But it also reduces your return, how much you can make. For instance, if I put all my money in Tesla, there's a good chance that, it's gone up tremendously. I think it's like 1,000% or something big like that. So you're going to make a lot of money. But it also can be overnight that you're down, right? For instance, Facebook was down 24% in one day. Now the market was down 1%, Facebook was down 24%. So if you put your money in the market, diversification, you're not going to go up as much, but you're also not going to go down as much, right? Whereas Tesla, or Facebook, you're rocking all over the place. So diversification is really important, but you have to understand that diversification also reduces your possible return in most cases, right? Because you're spreading out the money. Let's talk a little bit about diversification a little more. If I put all my money in, say, Pfizer, and then I put my money in, what's the other vaccine people? Moderna. Then I put my money in Moderna, and then Gilead, which is another one of those out there. So, but all my money in those 2 or 3 companies, am I diversified? I'm company, but not by industry, exactly. So I've seen this before, especially here in Houston, where people say, well, I have these 5 companies. They're all oil companies. Okay, well, I have 10 companies. They're downstream oil companies, right? So if something happens with oil, guess what happens to your money? Right down the tubes. That's not diversification per se, right? It's so you have to look at it as by asset class and also by company, also industry, right? But also, here's another thing. When I say asset class, is real estate an investment? Trick question here. It can be, yes, absolutely, yeah. For those of you who know me, know that I have my druthers with real estate, but yes, it can be an investment. So that's one thing. Generally speaking, real estate doesn't necessarily move exactly with what the market does. So if you have investments in stocks, you have investments in bonds, you have investment in real estate, you have investment in gold, now you're starting to spread out that diversification a little bit, right? If something goes wrong with stocks, generally gold goes up. If something happens in real estate, then generally, gold will hold up, maybe market goes up. Here's the thing. In what we call a bear market, when things go bad, right, like a recession, everything goes bad, pretty much, right? That happened in 08, 09. Treasury was the only thing that held up. So even that diversification didn't work, right? Because real estate was like right down the tubes, credit was right down the tubes, stocks were right down the tubes. I think gold held up a little bit, and then of course US Treasuries, and Treasuries are basically the debt our government puts out, so you guys know. So diversification is important, but it does reduce your overall returns because you're not concentrated, right? So let's see what we got. So here's our investment philosophy at the company. And guess what number one is? I only brought it up for that, is that that's how much I believe in diversification, right? You have to diversify your investments. I know people right now, in fact, we have one right now, he's a prospect, and he has all his money in crypto. Every penny. Every penny. Diversification? Yes? No? Absolutely not. Last I talked to him, he had lost $500,000 in the last few weeks. Now that's a big number, but that's what happens when you try to go for home runs, right? You got to diversify. Had another lady as a client. She's older, basically retired. She had all her money in US stocks, all of it, every penny. Feeling good. Market's done well, right? So I explained to her, I said, so if the market goes down 50%, like it did in 2008, 2009, which she remembered, by the way, and 2000 to 2003, do you feel okay with your situation losing half your money? But I'm diversified. No, you're not. It's all US stocks. That's all one category, right? So that's also important that you understand that there is risk even in diversification. Okay. So here's the thing. Diversification works, investing works. The biggest danger you will find once you start investing and manage your money to grow is having success early. What do I mean by that? Well, give you an example. I had a young gentleman. He says, hey, Jose, can you look up this company that I'm thinking about investing? So I look it up. I go, well, looks like they don't make any money. In fact, they haven't made money in 5 years. I said, I wouldn't invest my money in that. He said, oh, that's okay. I already bought it $1. It's at $4 today. I tripled my money in like 2 weeks. Then why are you calling me? He wanted to justify investing in this company. By the way, 2 weeks later, guess where it was at? Below what he paid for it. Absolutely. Right? Because it wasn't a good investment. But he had success. So not only was the main reason he was calling me was because he wanted to justify putting more into it, right? He wanted to get even more money into it because he had made money. He thought he was a genius. The other thing is the economy, the government, the stock market over the last decade has made everybody investing a genius. Because if you don't know this, and I'll show it to you right here real quick. Here's the markets since 2008. Almost straight up. It's actually quadrupled in that time frame. So people that invested during that time, they're like, hey, this is easy. I'm a genius. Diversification, yes, I did it. But I want you to pay close attention to these other ones. Now, the way this chart's set up looks a little weird, but when you look at this first bump here, I'd been in the business 3 years when I first came up with our strategy as to why you got to protect the money. From here to here was a over 50% drop in the S&P 500. It was 85% drop in the NASDAQ, tech stocks. Then it doubled again. So you're back to even. From here, in 07, 08 to 09, it dropped another 58%. Now, mind you, if you stayed all the way through, you did okay, right? But what happens with your emotions when that happens? Well, here it is. This is one of the driving forces of why we see investing as emotional, and why I believe that if you don't have the faith to understand why the Lord wants you to invest, your emotions can go like this. Roller coaster, that's right. And so you start here and you go, hey, Jose, I'm going to give you a few $1,000s to invest for me. And then I'm going to keep some aside, and I'm going to invest some too. And guess what? You do well. And it goes up. And pretty soon you're like, hey, Elliot, guess what? I bought some Tesla, and it's doubled my money in 2 weeks. You should get some too, right? And what do? That's right. You got to buy you some Tesla, right? Mind you that they're bigger than all the other car companies combined, which makes no sense to me, but they are. So you buy it, it keeps going up. So LA tells his friends, and his friends tell his friends, and everybody's going into this Tesla, and everybody's buying this company, and it's just going crazy. And you're all geniuses because you're making money like crazy. That's what we call euphoria. In 2006, I was sitting at a PTA meeting, and there was about 9 ladies there. I was the only male at the table. It was for our kindergarten kids. And of the 9, we were sitting there getting ready for our meeting, and 7 of them, between 2005 and 2006 became real estate agents. And they were making $200,000 a year. Mind you that the average income in our area was like $35,000 a year. What does that do to me? In fact, most of them were making more than I was making at the time. Sound like euphoria to you? Right? Everybody's making money. Just become a real estate agent. Sound familiar, by the way, right now? So I went home, started doing the diligence of looking at research, and told my wife, we're selling the house. She said, what? We just got in it. So we're getting out. Anyways, rented a house for a little while. I was wrong. It took about 2 years. Euphoria kicked in. Everybody was making money. Everybody next door was buying more houses. I had one banker, and this is a sad story, but he was a banker, a local banker, well-known, bigwig in the bank. Where I rented the house, he was living right below us. And it was a super fancy gated community. The average house was 800,000 plus. Mind you, our house was like less than half of that. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm building a house. I said, oh, well, okay, is that for you? He goes, no, I'm going to flip it, sell it. And by the way, I already bought 2 other lots, and we're going to build 2 more. I'm like, have you looked at the prices lately? He goes, oh, yeah, I'm not worried about it. The bank's going to pay for it because I work the bank so I can get the loan. In fact, I already got the loan. I don't know why you're worried about it, Jose. Does anybody know where the story ends? The real estate crashed shortly thereafter. He didn't get the 2 built. He didn't even get the first one built. He bellied up on the loans, all 3 of them. I saw him several years later at another bank far, far away from our town. Right? Euphoria kicked in. So we talk about greed. The old Wall Street movie says, greed is good. You ever seen that? Wall Street, anybody seen that? Greed is good. No, it's not. Greed is not good. The Lord doesn't say anything about greed being. In fact, he's very specific that greed is not good. And we can look that up in, where is it? Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 5:11. Let's look at that. And it says this. Everybody there? But now I have written unto you not to keep company if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator or covetous, right? Greedy, or an idolater or a railer or a drunkard or an extortioner. With such and one know not to eat. In other words, don't associate, right? Don't be with those people. Covetousness, greed, and there's many verses on this. Usually in investing, if you're going with the crowd and everybody's excited about something, it's probably too late, right? You're probably in that cycle of thrill to euphoria. You want to be careful, right? There's a bank here in Houston. I think it was, I want to say 10 years ago. Stanford, anybody ever heard of it? Stanford Bank? Yeah? Wonderful bank, wasn't it? To the tune of $50 billion in a Ponzi scheme at the bank. But here's what happened. They were guaranteeing, there's that word again, a high level of interest on a CD way above and beyond what all the other banks were pushing or selling. I mean, that should be key number one. Why are they doing it? Nobody else can, right? But how did they do it? I was on the golf course not that long ago. I happened to play with a guy and we were going back and forth. He goes, I said, oh, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a financial advisor. And I said, well, what do you do? He goes, well, I'm retired right now. I said, oh yeah, where'd you retire from? Oh, you probably never heard of it, Stanford Bank. I'm like, I have heard of that bank and I know what happened. Tell me more. He said, well, yeah, I was on the brokerage side, but we just believed what the guy said and we just kept doing it. And everybody just kept telling their friends and we couldn't stop. Money just coming in. Over $50 billion of people in euphoria, right? I almost guarantee you, I hate to use that word guarantee, but I almost assure you that a lot of people weren't taking the time to seek counsel, to seek the word of God. What kind of risk are they implementing? What are they doing with their money? And guess what? Gone. Turns out it was all fake. A US bank, all fake. Right? Euphoria. He didn't go to jail. Right? He left the company way before they found out it was. Oh, no, I was talking about the guy in that. Yeah, he's here. Yeah, the main guy, yeah, he took off and he probably hid some of that $50 billion somewhere, right? Probably in Venezuela or somewhere, Russia or somewhere, I don't know. Anyways, long story short, what I'm trying to get at is two things you should know. Your emotions will play with fear and greed. And how do you overcome fear and greed? By being in the Word of God, by being faithful, by understanding what He wants us to do with our monies to increase the kingdom, right? It's not so you can, triple, quadruple your money, which I see, right? That's what people are chasing. I see people in our business that it's all about the next trade, right? Starts to become a drug to them. That's their life. That's their livelihood. That's what they live for, right? That's very dangerous because that's greed is just going like crazy, right? What we look for, just so you know, when we're looking for investments is we look for when everybody's leaving, right? That's really where you get the value. That's what we call capitulation. And here it is. So you're in your house, your neighbor is selling his house, the one across the street selling his house, everybody's selling their house. You stayed in it, right? So what do? Do you sell at that point? That's right. Trina's shaking her head no. No. You should be selling when nobody wants to sell, right? That's when you sell. If you're going to sell, that's when you sell. You sell here, euphoria, when everybody's greedy, right? Because why? It's an investment. It's made some money. Move on. I have a great story for one of my clients. Dear, dear woman, just fantastic. Worked her whole life as a nurse. She's wonderful, right? Wonderful. But she constantly is trying to live like by just little bits and pieces. She's not trusting in everything the Lord's given her to grow even more, right? And so it's hard for me because love her to death, but it's like she's constantly battling kind of the things that we're talking about, right? Hard. But what I do love is that as a faithful heart, she's trying, right? She's trying. She's getting it. She's learning. So that's a good thing. But how do we overcome the fear? How do we overcome the greed? Because it will get each and every one of us. Believe me. It's got me, right? Oh, well, I must be really good at this because I just doubled my money in 2 weeks, right? Let's put some more in it. And then the other leg drops and you're done. So I know that's a lot on investing and greed and all that, but I don't want to step away from the approach we should take with our money and investments. And the approach should be, and I wrote this down, how we approach investing is a reflection of our heart. That's what it is. Are you investing just to grow and make money and be rich and, buy more things? Or are you investing because you want to take care of your family and you want to be able to take care of God's kingdom by using the funds and the blessings the Lord has given you to allow the kingdom to grow? By the way, what does that mean, to allow the kingdom to grow? Pretty easy. Pastor's been talking about it. What's that? To see the gospel shared. Thank you, Carrie. That's exactly right. That's what the purpose is. That the Lord, when he talks about in that parable, it starts with, for the kingdom, right? The parable is telling us why we raise our funds, why we invest, why we do the things that God gives us and blessings is for the kingdom. Yes, are we supposed to, use it here? Absolutely. But he wants us to use to spread the gospel. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been moved by what the pastors have been preaching about for weeks now, right? Discipleship, the gospel, spreading the word. I mean, that's what we're here for. By grace, we're saved. By his mercy, we're his children. But there's many people out there that have never heard the gospel, haven't accepted the gospel. And unfortunately, it takes funds to get there, right? If more Christian brothers and sisters understood this principle, I think more and more people would be saved every day. The biggest one that I understand is that when Pastor was talking to me about his mission stuff, I mean, what's the first thing a missionary has to do? Raise support. How's that possible? It's everything we just talked about, right? If we as a church invest and do wisely with our funds and are faithful, could we not support more missionaries? Right? Could we not support going up and picking up our neighbor with our own little bus that we drove around and got people? Right? God has no limits, but he gives us funds so we can multiply them, so we can use them for his glory, not ours. It's great. I made money in the markets. Yay. Now what? My house is now worth $3 million. Okay. Now what? Right? I mean, you have to ask yourself that question. I start asking myself as I'm going through this each and every day. I'm thinking, what am I doing? Not just what I'm preaching or talking to you guys about. It's what am I doing to help the gospel increase? And believe me, that is not a good conversation. Because I got to tell you, I know for a fact the Lord's talking to me to do more. And I don't know if this is for you or not for you, but for me, that's what's come of this lesson. I must do more to help the gospel continue. And it's not because I think that if I spend some money, all of a sudden 50 people are going to get saved. No. But if I don't even do it to get one, what am I doing? Yay. I got another mutual fund that doubled. Right? We know it's all his. We all agreed on that. Word is very clear. But what are we doing to help it spread the gospel? How many missionaries have we brought in and said, you know what? Don't even worry about getting any more money. We got you right here. We're ready for you. Where do you want to go? Venezuela? Mexico? Houston South? Houston North? Where do you want to go? Right? And that's, I mean, that hit me right between the eyes today, guys. It did. And investing is great. I'll talk about it all day long. I think you guys can understand that. But what are we going to do with that? Right? I think the gospel is, the Bible is very clear about that approach, is that when we do invest, it has to be with something in mind that it's for him, not for us. I mean, yeah, we're going to put away money. It's going to be put away for retirement or for whatever purpose that you decided. But how much are you putting away for the Lord and his work? Right? You know, if I don't invest and I don't have growth and more talents, as it says in there, can I, if a brother or sister comes over and says, hey, you know, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time, my kids don't have anything to eat, I lost my job. Sorry, man, I invested, I lost all my money. So I got nothing for you. Or, no need to say anything, the Lord's blessed, we done, here you go. Where can I help you? By the way, let's go have some coffee and talk about what we need to talk about, which is the gospel, right? It's important to know what your goal is with what you're doing with your money. I think the Bible is very clear on that. Next week, we're going to, oh, sorry, before I get into next week, I do have to make this announcement. I won't be here next week, and I'm going to California for a couple weeks. So our next lesson, ours will be 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now. The fourth week I'll be back. Brother Rocky will be teaching on creation for the next 3 weeks. All right? Yep, on creation. So the next week that we come back, I'm going to talk about sacrificial giving, which is, I think, our next subject. And why I bring that up now is because as we're talking about investing, I was talking about fear and greed. One of the easiest ways to get rid of that is through sacrificial giving. And we'll talk about how that works. When you go home this week, I would like you to read Malachi 3:8 again. You remember we read that when it came to the first fruits and tithes of the storehouse. But there's a second part to that, and I purposely kind of went over it pretty quickly. But read it again and tell me what the second part is. Kind of pray about that. And when we come back, we'll talk about what that really means, that second part of Malachi 3:8. Because there's two parts, and not just the tithe, right? We have a few minutes for questions. I covered a lot today, so I would assume there's some pretty good questions out there. Questions online? Come on, Fred, you're always good for one. He's laughing. No questions? I mean, you should be asking me like, what should we invest in? Or what should I be buying? By the way, just for information, we talked about the rule of 72. Let me see if I can get to the one that I wanted to. I don't know if I put it in here or not. I might not put it in here. Yeah, here it is. So own versus loan. When you're out there in the investing world, understand there's actually two separate sections to investing. You either own something or you're loaning something. Very clearly, real estate, common stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, annuities, variable annuities. That's something you own, and you own it so it'll grow, right? So you own it. Whereas a loan, that's different. That's where you give the money to somebody and they pay you interest, right? So that would be like checking, savings, money market CDs, bonds, fixed annuities. You're not actually getting growth necessarily, you're getting interest only. So that's the two areas of different types of investments. Obviously, there's millions of investment within those two areas, but that you can break it down to those two things. That's a really good way to diversify, is by having X amount in ownership type investments, X amount in loanership type investments.
General question. difference in asset classes and diversification.
Mhm.
At different points in your life, those ratios and based on your objectives, it would be different, correct?
So Gary's asking if the diversification
The allocations.
allocation is different based on your age. As you get older, you should be safer, for example.
And your objectives. And what you're-
Yeah, that is very common in our business. That's actually not how I look at things. I'll give you an example. Commonly in our business, people move money to the loan side, CDs, cash CDs, annuities, as you get older, right? But for the last 45 years, interest rates have gone like this, down, right? So bonds, if you don't know, safe investments, actually go up in value when interests go down. But that's been happening for 45 years. So if I put an 80-year-old person or a 75-year-old person all in bonds today, based on charting, right? This is the S&P, but very similar if you think about it. How safe is that person going to be over the next 5 to 10 years? That's right. So in other words, it doesn't matter if you're 80, if the investment is going to be risky over the next 5 to 10 years, why would I give it to you? Why would I ask you to invest in it? Because it's been safe for 45 years? Yeah, true. But you have to look at everything. Bonds act opposite of interest rates. We basically just came through a decade of the lowest interest rates in history. And the Fed has already said, I'm going to raise rates because inflation or because I don't want to look bad. You name it, right? So as that happens, and this is very common in our industry, well, you're 80, so you should have 70% bonds and 30% stocks. You're 20, so you should have 90% stocks and 10% cash and bonds. Okay, but what about the next 5 to 10 years? Is that a good place to be? If I put you in the stock market 100% today because you're 20 years old and the market goes down 50%, how are you going to feel at 30? Not good, right? Because I just lost half your money. So it's all relative speaking. This is why having a good advisor is very important, is that you have to look at what the true risk is. And sometimes that's a little misleading when you go through rule of thumbs, for example, right? I'll give you one more thing. You guys know what a target fund is? So a target fund works a lot like what Gary just talked about. So when you're 35, they put you in, say 80, 90% stocks. And as you get older, it reduces your stocks to more cash and bonds and safety investments, right? Well, what they found that they've been terrible, first of all, investment-wise. But secondly, if all of a sudden we have 100,000 people retiring and they're all in bonds and cash, and rates go from 2% 10-year to 5%, what do you think that's going to do to their retirement? It's going to wipe it out. That's right. Thank you, Gary. Absolutely. So even though it's a safe investment, is it? Right? Everything works at one point or another, as we saw in this cycle here. Right? We saw a cycle of emotions. Everything works. It's just, where are you in the emotional and value scale of the investment you're buying? Now I'm getting deep here. I'm getting a little deeper. But it's very important that I think that we sit down, we pray about things, we make conscious decisions based on what our own personal relationship with the Lord is, right? I think that's first. Then you can make a step forward. That's rule number one, I think, right? Because what does Matthew 6:21 say? Right? Let's read it directly because I don't want to misquote it. I do that sometimes. And it says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So if you reverse that, is really what the Lord wants, right? He wants your heart first. And when you have your heart in the right direction, the treasure comes because it glorifies him. Here's what I would tell you. If you don't have God in your life right now, it don't matter how much you listen to me. Don't matter how much you end up being a great investor. None of that matters. Because according to the parable we read, right? Gnashing of teeth, right? What is that? Thank you. From the young crowd over here. Absolutely. So you don't have to listen to me. But what did Abel quoted me today? There's no storage units behind a hearse or something. No storage wagons behind a hearse. No U-Hauls behind a hearse, right? We don't take anything with us at all. So yes, can we invest? Should we invest? Answer, I think it's very clearly yes. But what is the purpose of it? Why are you doing it? I think that's also very clear. So if there's no more questions, we'll go to prayer, and I look forward to seeing you guys in 4 weeks. Hopefully you come back. And I'm excited about the next one, actually. I already started it today, and it's pretty exciting because there's a lot of good information in there about how God works, right? So let's close. Dear Father, thank you so much for this time you've given me to listen and to learn from your word. And Lord, I just pray that if there be anybody out there today that's hearing this and that needs you, Lord, that they would turn their life over to you. We're so thankful for what you've done on the cross for us, and we are thankful for your mercy and your grace. We pray for a good week going forward. We ask this in your name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Next. Questions from the gallery?
What about if you invest in your child